have three very well-informed people, as you would expect. John Consoli, Senior Vice President of Sales and Marketing for FieldView Solutions, a very well-known supplier in this space. In the middle, we have Jim Kennedy, Director of Facility Engineering at RagingWire. Yes. Welcome, Jim. A colleague of Dan Golding, who was so controversial here earlier in the week. And on the right, Ray Pfeiffer, SVP for Business Development at Synapsense.
Big chairs, man.
So thank you for joining us. So let's just...
Are these chairs supposed to make us feel this uncomfortable?
They're supposed to make you feel small and vulnerable.
Well done.
So let's establish our credentials here. So if we start from the left, John, just explain what you do, your company, briefly, and
right,
in this area.
John Consoli, Senior Vice President of Sales and Marketing for FieldView Solutions. We're based in Edison, New Jersey, and our spot in DCIM, as Andy described the field before, is we're a software-only solution that focuses on data center optimization via real-time monitoring.
Okay, and just quickly, who are some of your customers? Could you say?
I
know you've got a lot of secret ones.
Yeah, we do have a lot of NDAs. We just did a presentation that I saw some familiar faces. Mentor Graphics is a large global customer. We're also very proud that we have 3 of the 5 world's largest investment banks are our clients. The world's largest online retailer and cloud provider.
Okay,
great. Thanks. Jim.
I'm Jim Kennedy with RagingWire Data Centers. I've been there for 6 years. We design, build, and operate our own data centers. So we come from operators at heart, but we don't outsource any of it. So when it comes to one throat to choke, it's us. So if we don't give the customers what they want, we're responsible for the entire stack. And I came from operations, both in the nuclear industry, where big data is interesting, and now in the data center industry. And I will say that we have moved between my house having smarter controls than my data center to now data centers are catching up, but still have quite a ways to go with guys like these.
Right. And you do use DCIM products in your data center?
Yes. We have, so let's clarify that. We have very large scale monitoring and metering applications on both the facilities and the IT side that are very disparate, and they don't talk well another. We have 2 SCADA applications that don't talk SNMP. All of our IT guys want to talk SNMP. We work with Schneider Electric, and we have 3 applications from them that don't talk. We have the largest, or had the largest brand circuit monitoring applications in Emerson Network Power, and it didn't integrate well with some of our other applications. Not to say we couldn't have done it for cost and some other reasons, but yeah, that's the reason I brought this up. I wasn't going to, but I'm actually amazed. Do we have operators in the room? Data center guys, or am I speaking? I'm actually amazed that the amount, and I agree with Dean, the amount that we expect from devices like this, and then we look at our data center and the amount of money we spend on our data center, and you can't do a simple thing like go on your iPad and here's power usage by rack. And when we've talked to customers like that, they're like, wow, you can do that? I'm on fixed circuit pricing. Or I can go to another tab and pull up what their temperatures and their pressure and they get alarms via SNMP or SMTP. And these kinds of things are still puzzling to us as an industry. Whereas I'm always amazed that when I talk to customers, the amount that they expect out of AT&T, for instance. You can go online, look at your bill, look at your bandwidth, look at your usage. You don't have to count how many cell phones you have. They kind of know that. And then we don't expect that from our data center providers who we spend infinitely more money on. So I think that's our main driver.
Right. Okay, thank you. That was still on the introduction.
Sorry.
Well, we don't have any more time left, so I'm just Ray Pfeiffer, and we'll call it a day. No, I'm the Executive Vice President of Synapsense. We're a venture-backed company by a bunch of Valley and also European VC firms, and 2 large critical or strategic type investors, GE and Bosch. So our core technology is mesh wireless networking. That's why we got funded. But very soon after the business was founded, we realized that we wanted to do an application. So we basically chose the data center market. We've been 100% committed to doing data centers for almost 5.5 years now. And our core technology is most of the stack that Andy was showing earlier in terms of, we started with monitoring and we've moved all the way up, all the way to the top of as far as the control piece, and we're filling in all the other pieces. So in terms of a company, we really got started being commercial about 3 years ago. We have more than 200 customers worldwide, and it includes, all kinds of different enterprises, a lot of the largest colos, banks, insurance companies, it crosses all industries.
Okay, great, thanks. So I just want to remind you, by the way, this is going to be an open discussion, so we're going to get to questions probably as early as we can. I'm going to ask a couple first, but please be ready to join in soon. So I just want to start, and we can attack this, anyone who wants to jump forward, but I'm interested in why there still seems to be quite a lot of skepticism about using this software. I've heard it here at this event. People who clearly have problems that DCIM could solve, and yet they're nervous about putting their trust in some of these solutions. And am I right in that? And if that is the case, why do you think that is? So I think you're all nodding, actually, but let's start at the far end.
I think in large part, Andy, it's because that everybody here is involved in data center, and I would assume that's most, if not all of us, have some form of monitoring in the data center today. Right? And before the DCIM acronym came out, I guess maybe 1.5 or 2 years ago, FieldView, our product in particular, is almost 6 years old. Right? So people have seen an evolution in monitoring, and unfortunately, there have been players in the marketplace who, in my opinion, have overpromised and underdelivered. So we have some prospects and some existing clients who have felt the pain of committing to a product early and tried to implement that product over a significant amount of time and have not seen the result. So I think there's still some of that in the marketplace, and there's also a lot of confusion, right? With so many companies have jumped in recently. I think if I had I wasn't here for your entire presentation, but the count is probably over 100 now, DCIM vendors.
Could be.
Right.
Yeah,
so with that many people coming into the marketplace and all of these stories, it's kind of like, the Tower of Babel, right? What's real, what isn't, how do you separate the noise from what actually is available? Right.
Okay. And do you think there's any kind of feeling that, the data center world is very geared to high availability, to do everything properly in an engineering way?
Sure.
IT doesn't necessarily have that level of discipline. And this software, isn't renowned for that level of resilience.
Absolutely, I totally agree with that. And when you deal with our experiences, you said before that DCIM right now is geared towards facilities, and that's absolutely our experience. So the pragmatic mind that's tied to being an engineer starts out in skepticism, right? It's just inherent to the beast, for lack of a better term. So.
Okay. I'll come to you. Ray first, please.
Well, from our perspective, we kind of think we were one of the very early proponents of this thing that's now called DCIM. And when we first envisioned it, 5 years ago, we realized there's going to be a slow adoption period. Fortunately, we have really good investors, and they're patient, and they recognize that the opportunity, once people get over some of the early reasons for saying no, and you get the early market adopters, which is really what happens with any disruptive technology, that you eventually get some proof cases to show this stuff really works. What we found is early on, although we had the best mesh wireless network, which a lot of people have told us, not just us saying it, and we proved the reliability of it and the security, and they couldn't use that as a reason. We found out that monitoring in and of itself wasn't enough. As you show it, it's the bottom thing on your. It's the basic requirement to get in. The fact that we can do it much more cost effectively is a nice thing, okay? And we can do it much more flexibly because mesh has that promise as a technology, and we did get it to work very well as our core technology. Until we moved up that food chain and filled in the blocks, there wasn't the ROI. So there was it was very difficult to get the people to buy this. And I think that's the biggest problem with the DCIM vendors today who chose to come at it from the traditional pieces, which is the asset management and the planning, because where's the ROI in that? You know, it's a business case, but it's very difficult to get people to give you real cash for that. What we did, which is slightly different, is we started at the bottom, moved very quickly into those other things you have, which is you have to have visualization, we have to have management reporting, we have to have analytics, we have to do something with the data. But we moved right to the top and said, let's go to ACT, because ACT is what brings ROI, and we focused on it. Now what we're doing is the market's evolving, and we've gotten, you know, some customers, and customers deploying this in large scale, is we just need to now fill in the other pieces. Or integrate, because I think, quite honestly, the verdict's out as to what vendors are really going to work in the asset, you know, or be the winners in the asset management, or even eventually, which I do believe is going to happen, the power management aspect of IT, which is probably just still the most in its infancy.
So, Jim, explain why RagingWire, hard-headed engineering types were willing to spend money on this flaky stuff.
Well, we did it probably 5, 6 years ago, and it's interesting because I took some notes during your presentation. The barriers to entry were costs. Yeah, I think you guys cost way too much, and you love to bill per point. And then I come back at the end and I go, well, it kind of works like I wanted it to do. And then you give me a change order. I'm not saying that anybody sitting in this room has done that to me. And then the second one is it doesn't integrate. We even deal with multi-billion-dollar companies who offer DCIM, and their own products don't talk to one another. We have done a data center almost entirely exclusively with one partner, and their various products don't talk to one another. And that's frustrating. The other thing I noted that our main driver wasn't driven by efficiency. That was an end result because we had the data to become the driver. It was driven by two things, one of which, actually both of which weren't on your list, which surprised me. The first one of which was availability. I never wanted a customer to call me up and say, hey, do I have a problem in your data center? That's kind of awkward. That's like your wife calling you up and, you know, asking you where the heck you are and you're supposed to be home. It's a very awkward conversation. The other thing that was driven by was customers' expectations. We wanted to set very high customers' expectations in the level of service and commitment we had to our customers. And when I first got to RagingWire, our SLAs were based off a temperature and humidity monitoring point that was driven by RagingWire. So I kid you not, we could take a temperature and humidity sensor, stick it in the center of this room, and as long as that thing never went above the ASHRAE, well, at the time we said 72 and we moved to ASHRAE, but as long as it never exceeded the SLA standard, we were fine. Didn't care what happened in Iraq, right? So to me, it was driven by availability and the customer. And really with the customer, it was consumer confidence. To give the customer, if they said, I want to know what's going on in my racks, I want to know what the temperature is, the power, I want to know what's going on with your UPSs, I want you to tell me when I have a problem before I have a problem, and I want the data so we can do it more effectively. That's what it was driven by. Efficiency and some of the operational stuff and moving up that stack in terms of controls is outcomes of having that available to you. But it wasn't, it's interesting, my top two wouldn't have been, weren't even on your list.
Right, but is it paying for itself?
Yes. You know, I'd love to have a customer come up here and testify that. Maybe I'll defer to Dean Nelson at eBay. After his speech the other night, you're just sitting around talking, having drinks with people. People go, boy, that's great for eBay, but I'm never going to put 6 2-megawatt containers in a 12,000 square foot roof space. And I said, well, that's one outcome of what Dean did. But to me, the real outcome of what Dean did was integrate facilities and IT and instrument to know what the hell was going on, and then tweak the system to optimize and make it more efficiently from dollars per kW or PUE or whatever your metrics are. You know, Google got up here last year and said, everybody should build a data center that's a PUE of 1.3. And we got to the later of the night and having drinks, and people said, well, Google didn't tell us anything really cool. They just said, you can build a data center with a PUE of 1.3. And it was like, yeah, they told us that because people still aren't doing it. People aren't taking some of these base lessons learned. They're seeing the 6 2-megawatt containers on a roof and going, now that's the 1% of the 1%. Instead going, boy, he did a great job of integrating facilities and IT, got the data, got various groups together, and produced a more efficient, effective product. And I think that's the challenge, is even when we look at folks that get up on the stage, for the greenfield versus the retrofit discussion this morning, where was the dollars per kW? Where was the cents per kilowatt hour? Where was the was some data-driven metric, and I think that's what our customers are desperate for.
But presumably you're not able to go up into the IT to get a full view of their utilization and this kind of thing. You know, I'm wondering what, we're talking a lot about convergence. Is that going to be valuable?
Yeah, with our customers, they're obviously on their own networks, on their own VLANs, and usually our data center stuff just doesn't even sit. It sits on a VLAN behind a VLAN behind a, it's 3 firewalls.
Right.
But we are working with customers, so right now today, we can push SNMP or SMTP alerts and information out to them, or we've set up databases to where we can put that database into a format to where they can read that information and gather that information from their iPad and export that data. So that data is available to them on an as-needed basis. So even though they're 2 separate and disparate systems, we've tried to work very closely with our customers to do that convergence, even though we don't own their IT stack.
So, John, so your software mostly does monitoring throughout different areas of the data, so it gives you an accurate view. Is it easy for people to justify the expense on that? And do they have the budgets for that?
That's an interesting question. One of the things that I think contributes to the slow adoption of DCIM at large is that people are interested and excited about what we show them, but many of you don't have an identified way to acquire DCIM. What's the procurement process? Whose budget is it in? Once it gets implemented, who owns it? Who operates it? And most importantly, with our team, we talk about 3 Ps, and those 3 Ps are people, product, and process. And we really focus on not just selling the product. Obviously, that's our goal, and we are looking to get paid for it, without a doubt. But we're really looking to have longevity in the marketplace via customer satisfaction. And a big part of that is when we talk with you about selecting the proper product, people need to be involved in the decision-making process, stakeholders from facilities, IT, and also at the C-level. It's very interesting to me now, Andy, how many times that in our sales process we actually wind up engaging with the CTO, the CFO, and in even some companies, the CEO, and some of the smaller companies to talk about the return on investment. People need to be involved in the selection and evaluation process, stakeholders across the board. And then most importantly, when we speak to a prospect about the implementation and that there's pain, change means pain, we all know that. But one of the things that we try to flesh out very early on is once you get this data, what will you do with it? Right? How is this data going to be used to drive efficiency, to drive optimization? Jim has painted a very clear picture of what your drivers were. It's interesting to me how many people are just kicking the tires, or there's so much excitement around DCIM right now because of the forecast and how much it's supposed to grow between now and 2020, that people almost feel like they need to perform due diligence by finding out what's available, what are we missing, right? And maybe jump into something, and by the time they evaluate, they go, well, we're not sure what our drivers were for this, right?
Right. Okay.
I'm almost curious from the 451 group, because you guys are out of the UK, and I got on that topic. It was a driver, was something that didn't drive us from the efficiency was an outcome, and that was because every month I got to review the power bill with our CEO. If you know our CEO, and being in a privately funded company, that means it's his money. So that was a main driver. But also, we'd worked with 3 of our largest customers to do preparation for AB 32 in California, which was essentially cap and trade greenhouse gas legislation in California. Whether you believe in it or not, and whether the gentleman from Greenpeace the other night, whether you buy or not, the U.S. Senate had the Kerry bill, and we were going to, and when the Kerry bill didn't pass, the EPA said we're going to do our own cap and trade potentially. And we know you guys work with Interaction and some other companies out of the UK and the EU. Have you seen a different level of adoption because of the regulation and that's what worries me too at night, is that if we don't get ahead of this, that regulation, that's why we got EPA Energy Star rating for our data center, is because we thought if we don't participate with the EPA and provide this data to the EPA, we're going to get run over by regulation.
Right. So the truth is, in spite of what you read, the regulation is very light across Europe. there has been cap and trade of carbon for a long time, but really it only affects the power sector. It doesn't really affect data centers. In the UK, they have the CRC law, which does require, can't remember the exact figures, but I think it's 6,000 megawatt hours a year. Anyone who uses more than that has to report. But the truth is you can pull that off the utility meter. It's not enough to make you do DCIM type technology. So it's a kind of, it probably helps begin some conversations and alerts people, but compliance isn't a strong enough driver, in my opinion. So let's just see if there's any contributions from the floor. A guy has his hand up here. Could you hold on a moment for a mic, please?
Hi, I'm Carsten Bauer with Schneider Electric. So thank you so much for helping us to better understand how DCIM can, optimize the data center operation itself. Could you perhaps, on a very high level, share with us, if I have a data center and I have no DCIM, this is my factor, whatever operation, and then if I implement DCIM in whatever form or capacity, it leads to X amount of optimization, savings and performance metrics. Any kind of data you can share with us?
Sure. I mean, we have been doing small and now very large data centers for quite a while, and using a DCM type tool, for example, that can provide the granular monitoring, and then using that as a tool, and I think RagingWire can definitely talk to this, and Jim can as well, is you can very easily balance your data center. And that's really why you need sensors. And I always hear this argument about how many sensors, how many is too many, how many is too much. And everyone asks me that question. I say, well, it depends, right? It depends on your density, depends on your configuration, depends on the layout. But the reality is, if you have the right amount of sensors in the right place, you can very easily balance the floor. And as a manual optimization tool, we've seen people, including one of the largest banks in the world, in multiple of their sites now, are going in, using the system, and then optimizing the floor. They've saved as much, and that's just by manually adjusting set points and/or the number of units running, because they can now in balancing the floor. So instead of overpressurizing it, et cetera, and running higher set points and also widening their humidity and control ranges, have saved, in large data centers, $400,000 or $500,000 per data center, which represents, maybe 30% of the cooling costs. On the flip side, if you do it actively, which is our active control solution, that can also go up a little bit more, because you're absolutely matching the IT to the cooling. And we've seen typically 35% and as high as 50 or more % cooling savings. And I think Jim maybe can give some answer to what you can do if you have visibility in terms of being able to control a data center.
So I was at a data center once, and they raised their temperature on their cryo units. And we went back to their chiller plant, and their chiller plant was running. So they raised their temperature in their cryo units to 70 degrees. Good job. And we went back to their chiller plant, and their chiller plant was still running at 45 degrees. Right? We met with the vice president of a large air handler manufacturer, and we said, hey, we want to talk to you about control of your VFDs or an AC plug fan. So what's the big deal? It's 20 horsepower fan. What's the big deal? In a mega data center, our first mega data center, to use that term from earlier, we had 2,500 horsepower of computer room air handler fan running at 0.8 lag power factor at 60 hertz. Right? I mean, so yes, 5 degrees on that chiller plant for us is $300,000 a year. 2,500 horsepower fan running at 40 hertz is almost $1 million a year at our current rates. And so that was, I mean, those are some big numbers. But we had to have the data to be the driver to really do that. And to provide that to our customers. That's why I was curious to see your response from even the multi-tenant. A lot of this was driven by our customers too. I'd be curious to see if, price point depression in the data center industry during the recession. How many people's utility providers, mine did 13.1%, we raised utility rates during a recession. Anybody else? And at the same time, your largest operational spend was going up 13.1%. We had price point depression in the market. Okay, I'm not a sales guy. I can't control that to a certain extent. But you better believe that the bottom line, that 13.1%, was not going to be reflected into it wasn't going to flow through the bottom line. There was no way. That was my pressure. Was you got 13.1% from the utility, too bad, it's not flowing through the bottom line. And we can't pass it on to customers. How do you do that? Well, that's a pretty easy driver to go out and look for solutions if you value your job. So that's, you look at those drivers, and that was one of our main drivers in terms of doing product integration and exposing our customers to the data. Because at the end of the day, one of the ways we got there was to have this data sets available to our customers and to help them optimize and become more efficient also. And to give them a stake in the game. So one of the reasons we do branch circuit monitoring was because we heard from customers that fixed circuit pricing was a bad model. The other reason we did branch circuit monitoring and pass-through power is now they have a direct stake in the game for me going from a PUE of 1.8 to 1.3. So if I go to them and I say, we don't like 65-degree air temperature and 55-degree chill water, and we want you to put in blanking plates and strip curtains and isolation here, free of charge. Oh, by the way, director, VP, this directly passes through to your bill. And here's all the data, anytime available to you for whenever you need it. That's why we did it.
Okay, great. Great, 2 hands. I'll deal with the guy at the front, please, and then straight after.
Ravi Mehrotra, Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Most of the data centers have a BMS system. Why do I need to have another vendor, and why are the BMS vendors not interested in this?
Okay.
Ask the Schneider guy.
I'll take an answer at that. Real quick.
Let's start with John, because he hasn't spoken for a little while.
That's a great question for us. That's where we live and play, right? Because most of the information that our product monitors potentially does mirror or piggyback information that's being picked up by BMS, right? BMS, by definition, building management system, and it does that great. BMS, though, exists in just about, it exists in this building. This building is not a data center. So information that's needed, Andy used a term before, convergence. And we talk at all of these conferences about how do we bridge the gap between facilities and IT. Well, no product does that. There's not a product that bridges the gap. And even that convergence would make an unfair assumption that everyone in facilities and everyone in IT is in alignment in their silos. And we know that's not true. But what we look to do is take information that traditionally is monitored and reported via BMS and roll it up into a dashboard where, in a non-intrusive manner, I should say, I've been in meetings where individuals from the IT group, the facilities group, and the C-level of the executive suite were all using FieldView to look at a dashboard, reporting on information that they could all understand in a platform that's accessible from any place in the world, because we happen to be browser-based. That can't happen in a BMS environment. Right? The information is not shared so easily. So that's one example of why I think you would want information in addition to BMS.
It does seem, I understand his point in a way, it does seem as though you're spending twice to get a lot of the same information.
No, but that's what these guys' challenges are. I think that's, when you look at price and cost, it's exactly what the challenge is because I'm already going out and getting, our data center that we just turned up in Ashburn. I have a SCADA system for the electric plant. I have a SCADA system for our critical mechanical controls. I have a BMS system. I have a battery monitoring system. I have an environmental temperature monitoring suite. I have a power monitoring suite, right? We could go on, right? And now I want to go bring a few of you, CEO, CFO, CIO. I want to pay these guys to make them all talk once another. You know what their response typically is let's see, who owns 4 of these pieces? Why can't we make these guys do it? So I think these guys are too big in spite of themselves sometimes, and you know who you are, right? So then you get guys like FieldView and SnapSense who go, we know we can do this. But now you've got the C-level guys going, I just paid for 10 products to do all this, and you want to buy another product to make all these talk? That's a huge issue. That's a huge issue. But the guys who are innovating and who are doing exactly what you're talking about are the smaller, agile, been there, done that, right? Did you come from data operations?
Absolutely.
I know Ray did, right? That's why they probably did these startup companies, is because of that exact frustration.
Right. So Ray, very quickly,
I take a
when
real
we'll get
quick
on, because I know it's your field.
When we started, obviously, and we still believe in this, is you need to be a fully open system that can integrate with building automation systems and other systems, which we
Absolutely.
do. Because if you've already paid for it, you shouldn't throw it away.
Correct.
But if you look at our roadmap from day one, we've slowly transitioned the product to the point where we have new customers now designing brand new data centers, where we are probably 70 or 80% of the full solution that they're using to control their data center. And these are very large new colos.
I mean, maybe theoretically, this is only for a data center. They don't need a
Well,
BMS.
and that's the other difference I'll throw out there. He says, why would not a big BMS company do this? Well, you know what? That's thank God for venture capital, right? We have people that are backed us that basically took a $50 million bet so far, assuming, Pete, we don't raise any more money. And we've invested that money 100% to do data centers. If you're working for, you name it, company, and say, I want $50 million to go develop a product for a market that we don't even know if it exists, by the way, yet. And maybe we think, since 451 says it's going to be $1 billion, that's wonderful in a couple of years. That's the reason that BMS guys haven't done it, because there's a lot more office buildings out there, and it's a lot easier to take that product and put that investment in traditional spaces. You have to have someone that's willing to bet on one segment, and that's what we've done with the
other
data
thing
center.
I think we could do a better job of, and I know we're out of time, is we need to specify it. Dean Nelson did another good thing when he did Project Mercury. He specified it up front. He didn't do it as an afterthought. He went as part of the engineering design up front and specified it. The good news is, for all the financial guys, you can capitalize that, and it helps the money go easier. But he specified it and held them to performance metrics. And he said, here's your performance metrics. If you don't meet them, I don't care how you do it, you're going to be penalized. And that's part of your contract with performance metrics, whether you use a BMS or whatever system you use. That's the other thing I think that Dean did really good during Project Mercury, is put the performance metrics in the design and the build specification, and didn't do it as an afterthought. Now, we're all stuck with legacy data centers that we have to do that to, but we can do a better job of putting that specification and design criteria up front before we build the data center to hold various folks accountable.
Okay, so quick comeback, and then we're going to ask one more question, and then we probably have to stop.
I think it would be easier for me and a lot of my colleagues that if the BMS guys came forward with some additional thing, and we will be able to probably get it processed faster than by hiring another vendor.
Okay, thanks for that. Keep reading the 451 research. You might get some answers to that.
They're not doing it.
I'm Hector Diaz with Oracle, and I was wondering if you could comment on a couple of pet peeves that I have about the way that DCIM is being sold. The first one is this whole area of what I call information overload. And I do understand that if you need to control something, you have to be able to measure it, but it's getting to a point that my analogy is someone's telling me, and I can install the system on your car and tell you instantaneously the voltage across the gap on every spark plug and the temperature of the air inside your tires and the instantaneous rotation of every ball bearing. It's nice to know, but I'm not going to do anything differently in the way I'm driving my car. There's very few things that I do. So there's this whole area about information overload, and I'm tired of people telling me, and we can measure this and we can measure that. The other area I think you alluded to, Andy, earlier in terms of for a while DCIM systems were being sold on the merits of ROI based on energy savings. And my comeback is I want to maximize my power bill. It really means that I'm not leaving any stranded power at my data centers. It means that I'm not having to go build a new one. It means that I'm fully using the facility that I built. So I was wondering if you can comment on that.
Okay, so got to be brief, gents.
I'll just say real quickly, I know we've talked a lot about cooling and systems, but we've come out with a whole power suite designed to do exactly that, because that's a huge opportunity and a lot of people's big desire. So the answer is yes, that's being addressed in part of DCIM. But I also absolutely agree with you. We do want to use the sensors in the boxes, but two things. One, they have to be accurate, and two, we have to know what their accuracy is, and they have to be readily accessible, and today they're not, for a lot of reasons we don't have time to go into. But even when we can, saying I'll pull all those sensors or every fan speed and all that stuff off every single box and every U is really not what the idea is. You want to have access to it, but you want smart data and the right amount of data, and we believe in doing the same thing. Even though I know people say we put too many sensors in, The answer is no, we don't. We put in what's required to get the level of information you need to make intelligent, reliable decisions. And if you can do it cost effective enough, that's the key. Our goal is to keep driving that down so that it becomes even easier for everybody to do. So.
Sorry, I'm going to have to rush you because it's lunch and people get hungry and bad-mooded if you keep talking. So.
There definitely is, I agree with you, sir, there definitely is information overload. What I said before, people, products, process, what are you going to do with this information? There certainly is information that does not, maybe doesn't have a use. My wife doesn't need to know where I am. Now, the point is that there's so much flash and pizzazz in the marketplace right now. I think that people get caught up in, our product does not do three-dimensional data center imaging because we can't figure out why anybody would want. It's cool. It's really neat. We don't do it because what do you do with it? Great, the data center spins around. Awesome. What's the application? No one's been able to tell us yet. So we focus on providing things to identify stranded data. That's a term that we use. If you go to our website, you'll find it there. There's value there. We can justify that. So I couldn't agree with you more.
Okay.
So most of our stuff we specify with, I'm an alarm, I shut down, and I'm off. That's all we want to know. I mean, at a high level, depending on the system, UPSs, I want to know if they're in bypass. But yeah, for the most part, you look at a Libre ICOM controller, it's amazing the amount of information you get out there, and you're like, I just want to know, I'm an alarm, I shut down, or I'm off. And they're like, oh, well, and they've changed a little bit. Stranded power, that was one of our drivers behind branch circuit monitoring. Because we had customers who contracted to 100 kilowatts. Right, you start to build out a 12 megawatt data center. Our first data center was 12 megawatts. Our second one was 24 megawatts. Our third one was 15. And you go, well, those sound pretty big. We get to a point where you've got customers who have contracted for X and they're using Y. Internal customers too. Your IT folks are your worst, sorry. Bill Doherty, if you're here. I know you came from StubHub. But they're our worst customer, right? Because they were just free, right? Install another circuit, take another PDU, take some more floor space. That's free. One of the main drivers we did behind branch circuit monitoring was on our first data center to capture that. Because now we could go back to our customers and say, you contracted for 100 kilowatts, you're only using 60, peak into 70, let's contract you to 80 and take back the 20, right? And it's a pass-through power model too, so, but we won't oversubscribe, so if you're subscribed to 100 kilowatts, we're not going to give that to another customer. So let's take your subscription level down, get that to another customer because again, Dan Golding said it the other day, and we think our metric's pretty good at $6,300 a kilowatt, right? That's still $6.3 million a megawatt if you have the land and floor space and everything else to build, which often you don't. So that's not a hard ROI in terms of 5 degrees, $300,000 in the chill water plant, but that's a huge ROI that we monitored because if we had stranded capacity in a data center, sellable for us is a huge, huge issue, which is one of our main drivers behind implementing this DCIM too.
Thank you very much. You can carry on. That is a good conversation, but we have to draw it to a close. So, guys, thank you very much. Excellent contributions.